You are looking at the White House just one day before Election Day. Early voting numbers are pouring in at a record pace as we wait to learn who will be next in the Oval Office for the next 4 years. So to help you be smarter with your friends at the watch party that you're watching, we're going to bring in CBS News Elections and Surveys Director Anthony Salvanto. Anthony, good morning.
Good morning.
So one of the latest themes that has really emerged here is the gender gap. I think I heard you say that the two most important words in this election are gender and gap. So break it down for us.
Well, this is what it is. It means that more women are voting for Harris. It means more men are voting for Trump. And in very simple electoral terms, if women turn out in higher numbers, if this gender gap goes into the 20s, the low 20s, almost 25%, maybe that would bode very well for Kamala Harris.
Anthony, one of the questions people have is America ready to elect a woman of color? Not only a woman of color president.
We have tracked that, and I can tell you it has increased. This is from our late October poll. That increase is important because not only is it in this campaign, but you can see questions like this over history. Back in the early 2000s, when the CBS News poll said, is America ready to elect a black president? Right? That was less than half. And then when Barack Obama was running, that number went higher. And now you see this here. Now, I should emphasize, this is what folks think of their country, not necessarily how they're voting. There are a lot of people who aren't necessarily voting for Kamala Harris who nonetheless look out at the country and say, yes, in principle, it would be ready.
People are ready for the concept of it, right?
That's right.
This is not describing how they'll vote, but it still goes from a third to a quarter.
That's right.
They're not ready, so that's interesting. We all want to be smart at cocktail parties. Well, we're not going to be at a cocktail party. We're all going to be working tonight or tomorrow night. But for people at home who are going to be at election night parties, how should they talk about the big issues to look a little smarter?
Okay, number one, the reasons behind the gender gap. It's not just policy. It is your overall views of culture and society in the U.S. too. Here's an example of what I mean. When we have asked people for a while, how do you feel about gender equality efforts across the U.S.? What we see is that the folks who feel those efforts have been going too far are voting overwhelmingly for Donald Trump. But the folks, and there are many women among this group, who say those efforts are not going far enough, they are voting for Kamala Harris. That's number one thing to explain to your friends what's behind the gender gap. And then the other thing I want to show you is this. When you look at the economy as always a top issue, what happens is Donald Trump gets credit for a good economy when people say they look back on it. Now, you might say, well, during the pandemic, people told us it wasn't good. That's true. Why is their memory of it better? Because they tell us they're looking back to their lives before the pandemic, before COVID, and that's how they're basing their financial situation. They want their financial situation back pre-COVID times, and then that helps Donald Trump because it says to them they'd be financially better off with him.
Anthony, one of the interesting facts about this election is people are concerned about the future of the institutions of the country. They think the country's on the wrong track and they're losing trust. And trust in the election itself is one of the arenas in play. How is the democracy in danger message playing with both Republicans and Democrats?
They're both sides. I'm actually going to bring up this slide. Both sides think that democracy is threatened, although for different reasons. This is overwhelming, okay? That's number one, and they say that the state of democracy is a top issue. But then you look at the breaks on things like this. We've asked how the political system works. Donald Trump has consistently won voters who think that the whole political system needs complete rebuilding. To your question about decline of trust in institution, in the process. We see in democracies a lot of times, not just the U.S., but around the world, when that trust declines, people often look to an individual to cut through things, and we see that here. Look at this. Now, it's not a majority, but by 2-1, Trump voters think the country needs one strong leader, even more than single-party control, to cut through it. That dynamic is out there.